Well, it's going to be a little bit of an awkward day from the looks of it, in how we do things now. Before I carry on, as I said in number 13, as the idea of these, despite the fact that broadcast to people on the internet, are sort of like isolation videos, and I'm not a Joe Ricks or any of these types. I mean, look at the YouTube trending, people talking about wedding dresses, for God's sake. But they're unedited because I don't have the energy or time or know how in a way to do nice little cuts and rapid cuts, and today I heard via Facebook that one of the most dearest people I've ever met and will ever met have passed away. And I feel awful in more ways than one. I didn't get to phone him after I heard he was ill with cancer anyway. I sent a text message in case he was with family or in the hospital, and just he had told somebody, make sure Matthew never forgets. And I won't forget. His name was Klaus. He was German. I first met him when I read the Marks and Spencers about probably 5 years ago. Time at M&S blurred into one 7-year-long stretch, and I was doing there was a group of us, like 4 or 5 of us, doing our mandatory fire training. So we were being led around the building and look at, do we know where the exits are, blah blah blah. And we were walking down the back of the shop, and it's in a newish shopping centre that's been there now, I don't know, since 2008. So and it's got this big grey bricks as sort of like the inside skin, and this voice in behind me suddenly went, "My God, it is like Koditz." And I thought, my God, that's coming from a German who's old enough, possibly. And so I didn't say anything. I thought it was a bit weird. And then somehow along the way, in the next few weeks and months, we would talk, and in the canteen usually, and I'd ask him how he was, and next thing you know, we're very best friends, and his family know about me, and he treats me, he has said to people he considers me a son, and he's got a son who he worried about, because his son has similar problems to what I do, and he worried about his daughters, and like you do, but there was room in his heart for little old me. And I'm 34 now, and he died at the age of 75, which is not a bad innings, but he was born in a town called Einbeck in Lower Saxony in November 1944, and he told me that his late brother, because his brother died early, a couple of years ago, was doing like family research and he's got their birth certificates, and his brother's younger, or was younger, and so his certificate's got all this stuff, but Klaus's birth certificate had like swastikas on it and some kind of statement, I think, about him being of Aryan stock, maybe, or some kind of Nazi phrase on it. And from what I understand, his parents were Nazis, and I was doing some research because I'm too nosy for my own good, and his town was overwhelmingly Nazi in the election of 33, like 98% or something. But then I suppose, all of Germany was, I suppose. But he said that his mother, I think when she was in the Bundedeutschmadel, which is like the Hitler Youth for Women, had to sing for Hitler once when he visited the town in 38, and it was like around the time of his birthday, so April 1938, and I don't think it was just her, it was like some kind of shindig. I mean, the Führers turned up, and she had to yodel, and Klaus told me the story and then goes, "Oh, this is ridiculous, we don't yodel, that's for Bavaria and Austria," or something like that, and I went, yeah, and it's just kind of, and his father served on the Eastern Front, which I was always fascinated by, because his father survived, and the Eastern Front words can never capture the sheer horror and immensity of what happened on either side. And the Germans got it rough because the Russians were coming at them like gangbusters, as the Americans would say. Excuse me. Story goes, Klaus said, and hopefully I'm not getting the details terribly wrong down. In 1944, his father was in a field hospital somewhere, and it must have been early night at 1944. His mother, from I assume Einbeck, or at least Lower Saxony, apparently took it upon herself that she was determined to see her husband no matter what, and somehow got to that field hospital. I mean, it's a story out of a movie. I mean, you consider the situation in 1944. The Eastern Front was getting ever closer to the borders of Germany, and it was awfully dangerous. I would have thought even a field hospital would be close to the front line, if not too far from it. And somehow she did it. And then, as Klaus said, 9 months later he came along. His father was evacuated from Stalingrad towards the end of the battle. So this man was incredibly lucky, and afterwards, apparently, after the war, his mother was never he said his mother was sad a lot. They both considered the Nazi period the good times, but then, let's be honest, if you know your history, somebody voted for Hitler. The Nazis didn't just disappear in 1945. But all of that came because I'm terribly fascinated by history, especially I like to know about the other side of it. I mean, when you're at school in this country, in primary school, you talked about the Nazis and stuff in World War II. And I remember we had a lady who lived through the Blitz come and talk to us, and about what it was like living. But you don't hear about the other side. And of course, I ended up doing the Nazis at GCSEs, for God's sake, and then I ended up doing it at university. One of my modules was it, so you can't get away from that for love or trying. But I'm always being fascinated by the other side, what made them tick and stuff like that. And and it's a bit of fluff in my mouth, weirdly enough. But Klaus was like the first German I could talk to without him being either offended or whatnot. And I think Klaus, in a way, wanted to talk about it. And he said to me and others when we were in the canteen a couple of times that he had a pervading sense of guilt about the Holocaust. And somebody said, why? You didn't do it. And he said, well, he was alive when it was happening. I mean, the Holocaust carried on really right up until the end of the war. I mean, a lot of military resources went into the acceleration of mass murder, whereas that it could have been put into fighting the enemy, such as the mentality of the Nazi war machine. And it's perhaps says something a lot of Klaus's character, that even though he was a baby when the war ended, I mean, he would have been, 6-7 months old, he had a sense of guilt that he was alive even as a baby when this was happening. And, I forget who it was, I think it was Hans Frank, governor of the occupied Poland territories, or somebody that a leading Nazi in Nuremberg said that Germany could last 1,000 years and the guilt would never be erased. Now Hans Frank was a bastard, so he was probably covering his own guilt, but who knows, eh? So anyway, Klaus after the war, his family after the war stayed in I think he lived on a farm which had a massive bomb crater in it that gradually got overgrown. Klaus ended up doing his national service in the West German Army, which I forget the name of, the Bundeswehr, maybe. And at sometime, I believe, in the late 60s, I guess it would be, or mid to late 60s, he met his future wife, Christine. I understand that it was at some kind of dance arranged by the British occupation forces, or at least it was sort of like their shindig, and the locals, from the sounds of it, were invited to it. And Klaus went and saw this young lady, and he said to himself he was going to marry her one day. He fell in love with her at first sight. It sounds like they lived all over the place. Her father was in the army, like an officer, British Army, and I think Klaus lived in South Africa. And along the way, 2 daughters and a son came along, and they ended up moving to High Wycombe. He worked in the post office. I forget where else he worked. And he worked at M&S before I started, and then came back in 2015, 2014, and always asked to be on a stand-up till or a sit-down till, because he didn't, his health was never perfect. He had cancer before I met him. He had heart attacks before I met him. And when we got certain managers in the shop we had a micromanager. You couldn't breathe without her asking what you're doing. And poor Klaus, once I found him wandering the crisp aisle, and I'm like, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "She has gotten me off a till, and I don't know what I'm doing. I only stayed on at M&S so I could work on tills." He was a card, He had an eye for the ladies. I'm not saying he didn't womanise, but he flirted with he liked attractive ladies, but he was a totally faithful man and a dedicated man. I suppose he was being a chap. He had a habit of saying things without thinking what anyone else might think. Like, we had a manager who was a bit on the large side, say, and he came walking in down the shop floor when Klaus came to see me. I mean, that's what I love about Klaus, was that he came into M&S just to see me sometimes. And this manager's barreling along, and Klaus suddenly turns to me and goes, "My God, he's putting on a few, isn't he?" He once came up to the bakery where I used to work, and I had an empty baguette basket with it was meant to look like it was in a farm market or something, and he had like a sack, a canvas sack, or whatever you want to call it, and he whipped out, and it was at Christmas, and he put it around his face, and then I was talking to a girl that I work with, Zoe, and he had it around his face and went, "Look, Santa Claus," and we just looked at each other like, "Oh God, Klaus has flipped." I called him the good German. Germans are good. I'm not being facetious if you are German, but it's hard to explain to you chaps, our friendship. It's not to say it was a weird, it was a friendship we didn't let anyone else in on, but I had I'm not doing too well at the moment. He was old enough to be my father, or at least, my dad's 70 in September, but we would exchange letters when he left M&S. Everyone, his wife, sort of found it a little bit funny in a charming way, and apparently when my letters would turn up in the post, she would say without pause, "Oh, it's Matthew," and she came in to see me a couple of times when Klaus was ill. And then she sadly died a couple of years ago, early 2018, January time. And I knew when I just got a text saying, "Christine is no longer with us. Life isn't worth living," sort of thing. And I'd known for a couple of months before she wasn't well with cancer, and I was writing Klaus saying it'll be okay. And I knew that he loved her so much, he would never be the same again afterwards, and he wasn't really. And, I worked in a cafe by this point, and I was usually on dishwashing because I'm useless on the till. And hot food stressed me out at rush hour, and I kept hearing that Klaus was coming in to see me, but it was on my days off, and I was in the cafe out back once, and somebody said, "Oh, there's somebody here to see you." So I walked out thinking it was a manager or someone, and it was Klaus, and I immediately whipped off my apron and I went to him, and he goes, "Matt, Matt," and I said, "Oh, Klaus." And there was tears, and he was with his daughter, and she said afterwards that he talks about you often, and he kept saying that he wished he was with his wife and was waiting for death, kind of thing, and it hurt. It's understandable, and he apparently wanted to take us to Germany a couple of years. I think it was a year before his wife died. That they were going back to his town, to see his family there, and he doesn't have much. He didn't have much family left there. Some had died, and I think the war hadn't helped, and the Cold War, dividing the country and stuff like that. And suddenly heard he wanted to take me, but my passport was out of date. It was short notice. And also I didn't want to infringe upon what was effectively something fairly family orientated. There would be me, sort of like I saw from. My German is awfully sporadic, and I can't string a sentence together, put it that way. So I've broken down twice in the past half an hour. And what do? I go to YouTube, but it's kind of like therapy, these videos. I'll miss him. I'll miss the letters. I don't think I'll be able to go to the funeral. I don't know what the rules are on funerals in this virus. From the sounds of it, the funerals are happening without anyone attending. And he didn't die of coronavirus, he died of cancer. And he had said not last week that he'd be reunited with his wife. And my faith has shattered since I was a kid. When I was a kid, I very firmly believed there was a God in heaven. When I was very little, when I was about 4 years old, I actually believed that because of what the teachers were reading. We used to get Bible readings in the assembly, and we used to pray. It wasn't a religious ceremony by any stretch of imagination, but I still remember that until at least when I was 6, 7, year 2 in other words, the teacher would end the assembly with a prayer, I think, and we used to get the Bible, or at least stories read from the Bible. So we had I still remember Mrs. Heyman had this big yellow spined children's Bible, like it was like a brick. No, not like that, but she was reading about Genesis, and I thought at that time that when you died you became a star. And like my friend who died in 2012, I hope Klaus has become a star, and I hope he is reunited with his wife. If there's a heaven, it has to be for people like Klaus. People like me don't deserve anything in life, and certainly don't expect to deserve anything after life. He wasn't family. He was old enough. But he was a great man. And the great men in life and the great people in life, the good people in life, don't get enough recognition, enough notice. We put our attention on celebrities whose lives are lived through Instagram and have millions of followers on this, that and the other. We nowadays, I can't remember who said it, sounds like Martin Bell, maybe Gore Fidel, or even or even George Carlin, that we elevate the something I don't think I can even go to a church to say goodbye. Apparently church services on Facebook now. It's a little bit early, but I figured that. We never drank together, but this one's for Klaus. One of the finest human beings I'll ever meet. I hope you are with Christine. And if there is a heaven and I'm going out, you owe me a glass of schnapps. And Goodbye, Klaus.